السلام عليكم أستاذ مولانا.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll just give a couple moments for everyone to make it in, and then we'll begin. طيب, inshallah. And if you have any questions, feel free to present them while we wait, inshallah. Let's go ahead and begin, inshallah ta'ala. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyid al-Mursaleen. Nabiyuna Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een wa ba'd. We are picking up from where we left off. We're still speaking about Sunan al-Wudu. And we're starting with in around really a selected group of hadith that we'll be covering today, starting with the hadith of Abdullah ibn Zayd, that the Prophet ﷺ, he utilized 2/3 of a mud and he rubbed them on his arms. Akhrajul Imam Ahmad wa Sahih ibn Khuzaymah. And then also from Abdullah ibn Zayd that he saw the Prophet ﷺ use water other than the water that he used for wiping his head, meaning he re-wet his hands to wipe his ears. وأخرجه البيهقي وقال إسناده صحيح وصححه الترمذي. He says وهو عند مسلم من هذا الوجه بلفظ ومسح برأسه بماء غير فضل يديه وهو المحفوظ. يعني that is what many of the muhaddithin have narrated. But today I want to start with the issue of wiping the ears, inshallah ta'ala, and then the Shafi'i conclusion of wiping the ears. So we can break this down in a general outlook that the Ahnaf, the Mu'tamad of the Malikiyya, and all of the Shafi'iyya all state clearly that wiping the ears inside and out, and when they say inside, they don't mean in the ear opening, but rather the inside portion surrounding the opening. When they say the outside, they mean the back of the ear. Al-Zahir wal-Batin. هذا هو الظاهر, the back part, wal-Batin, everything that's inside the ear area. And he utilized, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his hands to do this. And he inserted his index into his ears. Up until this point, there's agreement. Kalam Jamil. It is how it was done and with what was it done. Tamam. Some of the fuqaha stated from the four schools that the zahir is, as I said, that which is in between the ear and the head, or the side of the ear facing the head, and the batin is the other way around. When I say some, meaning a lot of them don't actually define it altogether. And we find this a lot in all of the fiqh schools where something will be spoken about, kalam jamil, but yet no one actually knows what exactly was meant. Take, for example, when we say wudu, صدغ. صدغ sounds like a common word, but let me share something with you real quick. Let me open up a file right here. It's the file that I shared with everyone on wudu. Okay, it's loading up right now. Let me write صدغ. If you have the file, you could actually do this yourself. Pretty much it has the majority of what you need of wudu in all details that the Shafi'i have mentioned. This is something that I was very interested in doing because my kids actually asked me to do it in wudu, and we're working on one in salah as well. And basically it's everything discussed about wudu in one file. Okay, so what is the sadgh? In the beginning, no one really pointed out and defined it. However, as time went on, they began to ask, well, wait a minute, what is the sadgh? And in our madhab, in the Shafi'i madhab, we have two tariq trying to identify what is the sadgh. The first tariq says it's part of the head. And that's all they said. They just said it's part of the head. This is what Sheikh Abu Hamid said. This is what Al-Bandaniji said. Al-Mahamili, Sulaym, Al-Qadi, Ibn al-Sabbagh, Sheikh Nasr al-Maqdisi, Al-Baghawi. Ibn al-Salah said, this makes no sense. We cannot have this assertion that it is part of the Ra's. He said, because in Rabi''s Mukhtasar, that's one of the books of Imam al-Shafi'i, I've spoken on this issue many, many times. We don't have all of the books of Imam al-Shafi'i. So there's going to be many occasions where a scholar will quote one of the books of Imam al-Shafi'i that we don't have. Like in this one. So here Ibn al-Salah says, in Mukhtasar al-Rabi'. We've never even seen that book, right? So when people come and say, no, I want a chain. Where's the chain to Imam al-Shafi'i? That's non-existent. Where am I going to get that from? Intra-school quotations, you cannot ask for a sanad for it. Because if we go to every single one of the four schools, we're going to see that they are quoting their imams, and there's no sanad, and the book that they're quoting from no longer exists. So we accept what the school says. This is what their imam said. And this issue comes up a lot when people read what Al-Qadi Hussein said. Al-Qadi Hussein said that Imam al-Shafi'i said, whoever says that Allah jalis is a kafir. Yes, this is a nas in the Shafi'i school. Yeah, And we accept exactly what Al-Qadi Hussein said, because Al-Qadi Hussein would not make that up. With the same logic, we say right here, where Ibn Salah says, no, there's a nas in Mukhtasar al-Rabi' and Mukhtasar al-Buwaiti. We're lucky, we have Mukhtasar al-Buwaiti, and it's there, that as-Sudgh is part of the face. Kalam Jameel. As-Sarakhsi al-Shafi'i, not the Hanafi, he said that's wrong, because what Imam al-Shafi'i meant by as-Sudgh in Mukhtasar al-Rabi' and Mukhtasar al-Buwaiti, he was talking about the sideburns. He wasn't speaking about the Sudgh that we call Sudgh. He was speaking about a Sudgh that they call Sudgh, and they called the sideburn Sudgh. Ibn Salah, he refuted that claim while he was making his claim. He said that's nonsense. There's no evidence they had a Sudgh different than our Sudgh. Only problem is that you go back to al-Bandaniji out of the whole group that I just mentioned, and they said that Imam al-Shafi'i called the idar a Sudgh. تمام مشكل كلام جميل. البندنيجي says وجاء في النص عن الإمام الشافعي, the Imam al-Shafi'i said الصدغ في الوجه إلى الأذن. كلام جميل. So he must be speaking about the sideburn, because that's the only way. And in another one, Al-Bandaji says, ما خلف الصدغ إلى الأذن. Okay, so obviously that is speaking about the idar, not what we call sudgh today. Interesting enough, Ar-Ruyani in his book Al-Bahr, he says, all of our earlier ashab, whenever they use the word sudgh, they mean idar. Imam al-Nawawi, even to this thing, he came and said, we have to accept this. There's too many people saying that the earlier ashab, when they used the word sudgh, they meant the idar, not the sudgh. The other tariq says no. In our madhab, determining what the sudgh is, there's three opinions, three awjuh. Imagine, ikhwan, we're not speaking about something complex here, right? We're speaking about something kind of simple. What is it? It's basically, when did they actually refer to the temple, basically, right? Actually pointing out where they are speaking about the sudgh is problematic. This is why our mutaakhirin from our ashab, and I'm pretty sure the other madhahib have their restrictions as well. We say, do not read the books of the earlier generations. Come on, look at this. The sudgh. There's confusion on what exactly was meant. The three awjuh. The first wajh says, huwa min al-ra's. The second wajh says, no, it's from the wajh. And this is what Ibn Surayj said, Kalam Jameel, a book that he has called Al-Aqsam. We don't have that book. Some of his students have another book with the same title. They actually mention the same thing. And some argued that Ibn Surayj never wrote Al-Aqsam, that was only the collection of his students, but that's a discussion for another day. Ibn al-Qas mentioned also that as-sudgh is part of the face in his At-Talkhis, Kalam Jameel. But there's a problem. When you read their wording, it doesn't seem like they're speaking about the sudgh, what we're calling the sudgh today. It sounds like they're speaking about the idar. Al-Qafal said the same thing. Here's how he worded it verbatim. And he's saying, he's probably the clearer out of the three that I just mentioned. He says, لأن الوجه أحاط بالصدغين من وجهين لأن البياض الذي وراء الصدغ إلى الأذن من الوجه. Now, if you're studying fiqh, if you've been studying fiqh for a while, you just have to read that and laugh, because you know that if anyone were to read from al-Qaffal the word Sudh and not actually get what he's referring to, they're going to understand the complete opposite of where the discussion was going. This is why you have to be careful. Reading the earlier works is not easy. The basic terms that people use have changed. You see brothers today, they'll take pages from earlier books and say, see. No, I'm not seeing anything that you're saying because you don't speak their same language. And a side point here that's very important. A lot of people say the earlier three generations. Well, ya Habibi, you can't understand the earlier three generations if you don't speak their Arabic. That means you need the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth generations just to understand what the first generations were trying to say. This is why when you see people like Al-Bayhaqi, Imam Al-Haramain, Al-Ghazali saying, well, hold on, that's not what they meant. What they meant was this. You have Al-Khattabi, you have Al-Halimi saying, well, hold on, what they meant by this statement is this. You have to take it. You have to, or else you're creating a new religion. It's really that serious. It's not a joke. You have to. It's a package deal. So the whole claim, well, everyone after the third generation, they're all fusaq, mubtadi'a, dullal, that's not going to work. That doesn't work. So as you can see, Al-Qaffal said, as-sudghayni min al-wajh. However, when you dig down, when he uses the word sudh, he means idar. The third wajh he said, and this is, I think their attempt to solve the problem. They said anything above the ear is from the head and anything below the ear, but they use the word inhadar. So it could mean from the ear downwards is part of the face. This is what Al-Mawardi quoted Abil Fayyad and others from our earlier generation of the Ashab. وَصَحَّهُ الْمَاوَرْدِيَانِ in his Bahr. He said this is the best way to look at it. However, others came and said, no, this is fasid. In modern day terms, it's not fasid. Actually, that's probably the best way to explain it. Now, starting from Imam al-Rafi' and Imam al-Nawawi, they pretty much pushed all of that aside and said, the Sudh is what we call today Sudh. That's it. That's why we see our scholars after Rafi' and Nawawi saying what? Your limit is a Rafi' and Nawawi. Don't go anywhere else. Don't do it. Because the mistakes of the Nudhar, when they were trying to criticize a Shaykhin, they made more mistakes than a Shaykhin did. You know why? Because a lot of these things, they didn't pay attention to. And this is why we'll see people like that came after. Again, this is pertaining mainly to the Shafi'is. We see people like Imam al-Kurdi. He's when he's arguing with Imam al-Isnawi on a lot of things that he tried to criticize a Shaykhin on, he's like, Isnawi, you misread the whole discussion. Your whole argument, the whole premise of your argument is wrong because you're defining things incorrectly. I mean, once it was said beautifully by Imam al-Kurdi, he said, Al-Isnawi's claim has no mudrak here. Therefore, his whole objection is worthless. Now, again, remember, Imam al-Isnawi is a legendary major scholar. I'm no one in comparison. None of those that came after him are like him in comparison. But a crucial detail in how they spoke literally went over him in many different occasions. I mean, in one thing, now I don't know if he was just trying to be picky, but he said, I don't know why Rafi' and Nawawi keep on using the word athiyuba. That's not even Arabic. The funny thing is that it is Arabic. And Al-Qadi Iyad, for example, years before them both, used it on numerous occasions. So why the criticism? Allahu A'lam. Back to our point here. Now, I mentioned that big portions of the four schools that did identify the ears, they said the Zahir, right, is the back of the ear. The Batin is the front of the ear, okay? Allah did not actually identify what the zahir and the batin is. No, they just said zahir and batin. Some of them, however, said that the zahir is what is seen when looking at a face, and the batin is what's behind the ear, the back of the ear. A minority have said this, and you can go back to books such as Dar al-Muhtar, Tuhfat al-Muhtaj, Sharh al-Kabir on al-Khalil, Al-Insaf. So in all these schools, they'll actually quote this defining of the zahir and the batin. Tamam. Now, today for us, when we say zahir, we mean the back, and we say batin, we mean the front, and we call a batin because there's twists and curves and turns in the ear. Tamam. Now, why is it important to know this? Because we see from very early on, throughout the schools of Ahl Sunnah, it always says wipe the zahir and the batin. So we need to identify what is this zahir and what is this batin. Now, we said wiping the ears for the most part amongst the majority is what? It's sunnah. Which water though? Can you use the same water? Yes or no? The majority of the Malikiyya and the Shafi'iyya and the Hanabila, they said it is sunnah that you use new water. Okay. But there's more to that than just that. There's more to it. Okay. Shafi'iyya said the same. Tamam. But how? How do you actually do it? I'm going to leave the Shafi'i school to the end. Let's focus on the other schools first. So the Malikiyya, they said you need to wipe the ears 3 times. The zahir, the batin, and the opening. That's what we call a simmakhayn. Kalam Jameel. And you use new water, you re-wet your hands after wiping the head. They said, but if you use the same water on your hands that's left after wiping your head, then you've only performed 1 sunnah. What do they mean? They say that here there's 2 sunnahs: wiping the ears and using fresh water. Tamam. They said, however, you could get away with wiping with the same water from the head, but not the sammah, the opening of the ear. No, you're going to need, that's a separate situation. So you might need to use a finger that you didn't use while wiping the rest of the ear. So now they just divided it, and you can take this into your notes. They divided wiping into ears into 3 sections. Ma jadid, new water, right? Mash, and as-sammah. So for the Malikis, that's how they broke it down. Tamam? Now, as for the Hanabila and some of the Malikiyya, minority, they said the mash of the zahir and the batin is wajib. Is what? It's wajib. Tamam? But the Hanabila, they said, and it's part of the head. Why? There's a hadith narrated by Abu Dawud from Abi Umama, and in it it says, Al-udhunani min al-ra's. It's also narrated by Imam al-Nasa'i. Tamam. The hadith for the Shafi'iyya, we view it to be weak. And I'll get to the Shafi'iyya in a moment. However, some of the Hanabila also said that it is sunnah to wipe them after the head with new water because of the hadith that we're talking about today from Abdullah ibn Zayd, that he saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam making wudu, and he took water for his ears other than the water he used on his head. Tamam. There's an argument, and Ibn Hajar mentions this in a Talkhis from Ibn Daqiq al-Eid, who said there's issues with this hadith. What's the issue of Ibn Daqiq? He argues that there's better chains for this hadith that does not mention the ears altogether. Tamam. But Ibn Hajar does not comment on this. Like, he doesn't say, yes, Ibn Daqiq, what he's arguing is stronger. He doesn't, which is problematic. Now, you might say, well, why is it problematic? Well, I mean, Ibn Daqiq al-Eid said it. He's from the Mushtaghirin bi'ilm al-Hadith, so he would know. True, he would. But there are people stronger than him that have not mentioned this ever. On the contrary, I mean, Imam al-Bayhaqi himself said, this is sahih, and this is the best thing here in this discussion for the Shafi'is. Tamam. Ibn Hajar did not really comment on this to support the claim of Ibn Daqiq al-Eid. And many scholars of hadith, when asked about the efforts of Al-Imam Ibn Daqiq al-Eid, they said, هو من المشتغلين بعلم الحديث. That's not really a great status lifter, okay? His claim would basically be that this portion of the hadith of Abdullah ibn Zayd would not be acceptable. But to say that, you're going to need a lot of evidence than just to say, well, I have another chain that's stronger and doesn't have this part. Well, okay. It's possible that people make mistakes when they're narrating. It doesn't necessitate that this addition is wrong. It could have been that they forgot. And why is it taking us hundreds of years to figure this equation out? That stuff doesn't happen. You know, the whole, my teachers didn't know what La ilaha illallah meant and I did scenarios. Yeah, that's a fantasy, right? That's Alf Layla wa Layla, right? That's Jules Verne talking about a dystopian future. Everyone forgot everything. That doesn't actually happen in reality. Okay, so in order to make a claim like that, you're going to need a lot more than, I think this chain is a little bit stronger. That's not how it works. Tamam. There's another hadith from Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu. He said that he saw the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam wiping his head and his ears. And in one of the chains it says, and he inserted his index fingers into his ears and had his thumb on the back of his ears. Tamam. But does this mean that the wiping of the head and the ears was one and the same thing? Those that argue for that, they said yes. Ibn Abbas did not separate between the two, and he's giving you so much detail. Why are you objecting? And the hadith is authentic from Ibn Abbas. It's narrated by Ibn Hibban. Parts of it in Abi Dawood. The bulk of it is in Ibn Majah. Ibn Hibban's chain of it was a little bit better than, and wording than Ibn Majah's. One of the narrators, he summarized it way too much. Because remember, the scholars of hadith accepted narration bil ma'na and ikhtisar. So you shorten the hadith, you express it in the way that you understood it. Now, you aren't great at expressing yourself like me, right? The listener might hear it as something completely different than what happened, and that's okay. As long as it's not mutawatir, that's not a big deal, right? Because jawaz everywhere bil ma'na. But it gives us the burden of additional research, which we'll do happily, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, without any ishkal. As-Saba al-Ahnaf, they said you wipe the entirety of the head and the ears with the same water. Why? Well, because the hadith, al-udhunani min al-ra's, right? And some of them, they argued and they said, obviously he doesn't mean that they're one in the same part. So when he says al-udhunani min al-ra's, it means in its hukm, not in any other way. Tamam? And that's your overall conclusion of the four schools and the wiping of the ears. Now comes the Shafi'iyya. The Shafi'iyya, in short, they said you're going to use new water. So you're going to re-wet your hands, right? You're going to insert your index fingers into your ear, and you're going to wipe the back with your thumb, and you're going to use your index to clean the ears. And the wiping of the sammah, the opening, and the batin, basically the facing part of the ear, not the one facing the head, they're going to be separate. Meaning you're not going to use your index finger to clean inside your ears and then put it on the sammah. No, if you do that, then you have to re-wet your hands. So in other words, they're looking at the ears as three parts: opening, the looping, and then the back. Each one of those should get its own separate water. Each be wiped 3 times. The famous question that I always hear from new students of knowledge is, well, if I wipe my head with my index and my thumb, can I use, my pinky and the other fingers to do the ears one at a time? Yes, you can, because it's separate water. Tamam. But the Shafi'iyya did not stop here. You see, the Shafi'iyya, they added a clause into this discussion. If you're Shafi'i and you've been taking my classes, you've heard about the possibility of you wiping your ears many, many more times than anything you've just heard me state right now. Okay. And this goes back to certain qala'id that we utilize when we are understanding different masail. The qa'idah here that we're going to be looking at is al-khuruj min al-khilaf. Al-khuruj min al-khilaf, barakallahu feekum, is a concept that exists somewhat in all the 4 schools. But the Shafi'iyya, they take it to heart more than I've seen from anyone else. So what we say is, yes, that's how you wipe the ears. You understand that? Okay. This is how you're gonna do it. After you wash the face with the same water, every time you wash, of the 3 washes of the face, you're gonna wipe your ears. Then after you wipe your head, every time you wipe your head, you're gonna wipe your ears with that same water on your fingers after wiping the head. That's another 3 times. And then, so that's 6. That's 6 now, right? You've done. Okay. And then you're going to wipe the zahir and the batin of your ears with new water. And then you're going to re-wet your hands, right? And wipe the sammah 3 times. Most people lose count after that. And you'll see the majority of our ashab from the mutaakhirin are somewhere in between 12 to 18 times you're going to actually wipe up your ears. So if you're Shafi'i, you should have the cleanest ears on the face of the planet. Literally, not figuratively. So I want to share that qa'idah with you. Al-khuruj min al-khilaf. There are many qawa'id. The schools will implement them in areas that they feel that there's no need for average people to be debating, or even students of knowledge to be debating. It's not the end of the world. If you're in a community where they're all ahnaf, alhamdulillah. You know, if you act wise, you never know. Maybe one day the imam in Fajr will be like, Sheikh Abdullah is there. Let me do qunut today just to make him happy. You never know, right? So, take these things into consideration, especially when the fuqaha are telling you, we assume this is how it should be understood. Then understand there's going to be leniency there, right? Take it with ease. Okay, next hadith. Oh, afwan, we didn't actually speak about the dalk. That's very important. Does anyone have any questions about the ears? Because I know that's something that a lot of people have issues on. Okay, I am not seeing any statements, so I'll assume we move forward. So the hadith, that earlier hadith from Abdullah ibn Zayd, and the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam ata bi thuluthay muddin faja'ala yadluku dhira'ayhi. Ad-dalk in wudu is not, it's not one of the most essential concepts of wudu, but rather it goes back to another understanding altogether. And that is, how do I assert that the water has gotten to where it was supposed to be? And that's realistically where all of the discussion of dalk usually falls into. Tamam. You won't really find many of the fuqaha speaking about it beyond that point. Ad-dalk fi al-wudu. Now, if you notice something right here, you'll see that Ibn Hajar actually mentions it right after takhleel, because it's the same concept, right? It's the idea of, what do I need to do to assert the completion of the udu? We have the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Musi al-wudu, sending the man back. Why? Because he did not fulfill the wash that he was supposed to do. Tamam. From here, we have many of the fuqaha saying, yastahib ad-dalk. It's what? It's mustahab. To do what? To do dalk. Limada? Why? What's the point? To assert you have completed, you have completed the wash that you were ordered to do. And this also falls into issues of al-khuruj min al-khilaf. We have many of the fuqaha, they'll bring up mura'at al-dalk wa adam mura'at al-dalk عند اختلاف الاقتداء, when you are running into issues of people following different madahib. كلام جميل. هذا هو المقصود من الدلك. Now, the Malikiyya, they considered a dalk to be a rukn. Why? Well, simple. If I am saying the only way for me to have certainty that what I am doing actually completes the act, then ما لا يتم الواجب إلا به فهو واجب. If in order to fulfill an obligation, I need something else present, then that other thing that needs to be present is also wajib. Kalam Jamil. As a matter of fact, it didn't only stop there. The Ahnaf, for example, when they spoke about situations where you have certainty in tathir, for certain cases, they consider ad-dalk to be from the mutahhirat. Think about that for a moment. Kalam Jamil. The Hanabila, they mentioned that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said about a woman whose garment is collecting dirt, or shoes collecting dirt, that you can clean it by doing what? Dalk. Now in wudu, the Ahnaf, the Shafi'iyya, the Hanabila, they said it's sunnah. It's not a fard. Tamam. Others argued. Internally, there's debates, but it's sunnah. Al-Imam al-Muzani in our school, the Shafi'i school, along with the Malikiyya, said no, it's fard, it's a rukn. Why? Imam al-Muzani, he brought up the weirdest approach. He's our Imam, I can say the weirdest, without anyone getting offended. He said, in tayammum, you have to have imrar al-yad. So in wudu and ghusl, you need to have imrar al-yad. Again, they rejected that very easily by saying tayammum is called taharatun da'ifa. There's going to be a little bit of excessive motion as opposed to things that are using water, right? Now, the Malikiyya, in order to bypass this argument of tahara qawiyya and tahara da'ifa, which is a major concept in the Shafi'i school, they said, no. They said, ad-dalk faridatun fi nafsih. Basically, they said, the idea is not to get the water to the skin. The idea is to make sure that it's rubbed onto the skin. So getting the water to the limb became one rukn, but wiping it on became another. Now, a lot of them came and said, wait a minute. What? That doesn't make sense. I think it was Imam al-Ujhuri, if I'm not mistaken, who said, the mudrak of the adillah says that the obligation upon me is to get the water there to the limb and cover that limb. Dalk, making that a farida, he didn't agree with it. But the mu'tamad of the school, as Al-Imam al-Dusuqi says in his Hashiyah on Al-Sharh al-Kabir, is that dalk is a wajib within itself. تمام. طيب. هذا بالنسبة لك. We can move on to the next hadith. He says, وعن أبي هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول إن أمتي يأتون يوم القيامة غرا محجلين من أثر الوضوء فمن استطاع منكم أن يطيل غرته فليفعل متفق عليه واللفظ لمسلم. هذه إطالة الغرة والتحجيل. Now, the overall sentiment is that these acts are sunnah, but it's in the details that we dwell and travel. The Shafi'iyya and the Mu'tamad of the Hanabila is that these are sunnah, and that is to go beyond the limb after fulfilling the limb. Pay attention to this, my dear brothers. The idea in the Shafi'i school and the Mu'tamad of the Hanbali school is that you need to finish the limb and then you go beyond, not during. Tamam? So the Ahnaf, they said, no, this is from adab al-wudu. Now you might be wondering, like, well, what's the difference? Well, it depends on the angle that you're looking at, right? So when you say something is a sunnah, it means you do it, you don't do it, it's no big deal, right? You get extra points for doing it. But when you say adab, it kind of makes you want to do it. Arguably, one might say, making it from the adab sounds more exciting. In a sense, it would tempt people to do it more. But before I move forward, we started with a ranch in the rotary, right? We kind of started with like, we don't even know what the sudr is because of the khilaf. Since we're in wudu and we opened up that can of worms today, let's speak about al-ghurra wa tahjil in a bit of depth and detail. Sorry, Aswaid. In the Shafi'i school, because is there an issue? Yep, there's an issue. You see, again, as we said before, sometimes the earlier generations really just don't tell you what they mean. They followed the hadith in the Shafi'i school, but in our earlier generations, they didn't specify what is al-ghurra and what is at-tahjil. It wasn't until Imam al-Rafi'i came and he started to break it down a little bit better. You see, Al-Imam al-Ghazali, he says al-ghurra and al-tahjil are one thing. Many of the Shafi'iyya kind of sat back and scratched their head and said, well, wait a minute, how can it be one and the same thing? Now, there's a way to look at this correctly. There's a way to look at this incorrectly. Incorrectly would be that when he said it was one thing, meaning it was one act, obviously it's not what he meant. That would be impossible. How can ghurra and tahjil be the same thing? Why would the Prophet ﷺ mention the same thing twice? That would be odd, right? So Imam al-Rafi'i, what he does in the Sharh al-Kabir is that he quotes the other scholars who are before Ghazali, during al-Ghazali and after al-Ghazali, all saying what? Al-ghurra italatul ghasli fi jami'i anha al-wajh. Meaning the boundary, you're going beyond the boundaries of the face. Kalam Jamil. Al-Qadi also said, when we say Al-Qadi, we mean Qadi Hussein al-Marwazi. He took from Al-Qaffal, Qaffal took from Ibn Surayj took from Al-Muzani and Al-Rabi' and the Za'farani, and those are the students of Imam Shafi'i. There's your sanad for you, right? So Al-Qadi says, and to wash the hands as far as you can, going towards the shoulders, and the feet going up until in the direction of the kneecaps or the knees. So right there, you actually have a breakdown of what it is. If you put that next to what Al-Ghazali said, then basically what he meant is, Al-Ghazali, by saying that they're the same thing, that it's you going beyond the limb. Yes, in that sense, al-ghurra and tahjil are in fact the same thing. Al-Imam al-Mutawalli said, al-ghurra is to wash some of the head with the face. And tahjeel is to go up over the elbow and over the ankle with your hands and feet. Kalam Jameel. And you also have Imam al-Haramain said the same thing. Kalam Jameel. The only problem is Imam al-Haramain for some reason doesn't mention the face. So when you take that Imam al-Haramain doesn't mention the face, and put Ghazali, his student's words next to him, there's a problem. But there's a bigger problem too. You see, Imam al-Haramain, when he mentioned it, right, he mentions the hands and face. When al-Ghazali mentions it, he only mentions it next to the hands. So the assumption here is that al-Ghazali, he looks al-ghurra wa ta'jeel as something related to the hands only. Many of the Shafi'iyya, they said, well, wait a minute. That's impossible. That's what al-Ghazali thought or assumed or meant. Don't forget his books are summarizations, right? Many Shafi'i said, well, Ghazali is wrong because al-ghurra has to do with the face, has nothing to do with the hands. So their whole breakdown, him and his teacher is wrong. Kalam Jameel. Imam al-Rafi'i, he says, you understand that most of our ashab never even mention the face. We literally have hundreds of books from Mutaqaddimin, according to al-Rafi'i Nawawi, that didn't even mention the face in the whole discussion. As if it wasn't even part of al-ghurra wa tahjeel altogether. Kalam Jameel. Now, al-Rafi'i says, well, you know, at the end of the day, we understand that ghurra wa tahjeel are two separate things. Ghurra is in the face, tahjeel is in the hands and legs, or hands and feet, right? We understand this, khalas. Kalam Jameel. And Imam Nawawi came and said, that's understood. There's probably a million of other reasons why they didn't actually mention it. A lot of times understood. Which brings us to another issue that's very important for you to understand when you're reading fiqh books, old and new. There's a concept that's present. This is in all four schools. No one is innocent from it because it's not a mistake. It's jaryun ala al-ghalib. It's what we call it, jaryun ala al-ghalib. It's how people speak. Imagine someone 200 years ago reading a fiqh book that we write today. Imagine all four of us right now, we got together and wrote a fiqh book, right? And we said, and we wrote, yani, it'll take you 10 minutes to get to X. 100 years ago, they're like, what is this? What are these people talking about? If I'm going to walk there, it's going to take me an hour. Why are they saying 10 minutes? Did they have different watches? Right? Maybe not 100 years. Let's say 300 years in the past. And we wrote a fiqh book today. And we said, well, it takes you 10 minutes to go to the masjid that's in this area. And they're looking and they're trying to study like we're studying right now. We're like, well, wait a minute. If you're going from point A to this point over here, according to this fiqh book, he's saying 10 minutes. That doesn't even make sense. What did they fly? They'll be in shock, right? And with the progression of technology, we'll just say that there's this constant uptrend and innovation beyond our recognition. In 200 years, they're probably like 10 minutes. Why did it take them that long? Right? We'll just say that's a possibility. Now, at that point, you'll hear people say, well, we need to update the books. No, you don't need to update the books. You need to learn the concepts because people will speak in the way that they are familiar with at their time. This will impact how the fiqh issues are being presented to you. In other words, everyone knew what ghurra and tahjeel meant. It was a common sunnah. Why do you have to mention it 1,000 times? Well, I have to mention it when I'm talking about the face, and I'm going to mention it when I'm talking about the hands, and then when I'm talking about the... Why? If we all know that ghurra and tahjeel is something great that you should do because it's sunnah, and when I say should here, I mean highly recommend. I don't mean should as in wajib. See, it's going to be jarr al-ghalib. Today, when we say should, when we're speaking about things, we might be teaching brothers or studying with our brothers, studying with our family, teaching our kids. I'm saying you should. pray the sunnah. It's kind of like, well, wait a minute, you just said yajib salat sunnah, right? No, that's jaryun ala al-ghalib. That's how we speak with one another, right? I say you should, meaning, this is something you should be caring for. Think about that. Kalam Jameel. So that's probably why earlier generations just didn't touch base on that much. Kalam Jameel. So what is al-ghurra? According to Imam al-Nawawi, it's to go in the face, a little bit into the head when washing, and a little bit into the neck. Another pause. We have to, because it's a long discussion. A lot of people come to the issue and they say, Masih al-raqabah. What is this? The Ahnaf. There's a narration from Imam Ahmad that say it's what? This is mustahab, right? And they argued on how it should be done. Some of them said it's sunnah, right? The Shafi'i and the Malikiyya and the Mu'tamad of the Hanabila came and said, what? No, la yusan, it's not sunnah, nothing shown in it, right? And some of the Ahnaf and the Shafi'iyya, they said it's bid'ah. Even Imam al-Nawawi said, Masih al-raqabah bid'ah, right? Some of the Malikiyya said yukrah, and it's from al-ghulu, right? FYI, that's only pertaining to wiping the neck. Washing the neck, however, that's sunnah. You see, that is sunnah. How is that sunnah? That's what italat al-ghurra means. You see, what they're talking about is an additional act called masih al-raqabah. That's bid'ah. Yeah, for the most part, I think everyone can agree. That's bid'ah. Including some of the neck, when you're doing it, is sunnah. That's washing. That's masih. They're two different things. Of course, you'll hear people from different groups and organizations and ideologies who come and say, see, Imam al-Nawawi said it's bid'ah. Yeah, Imam al-Nawawi also said that anta ya fulan you are mubtadi'. Why? Because you're not understanding how we speak in fiqh. Tamam. Back to our point, al-ghurra wa tahjeel. As I said, in the Shafi'i school, they said al-ghurra is in the wajh. How do you do it? How do you do it correctly? You're washing some of the head, top of the head, right? And some of the neck. You're washing. Imam al-Nawawi said this, by the way. The one who said that wiping is what? Is bid'ah. Tamam? What is tahjeel? Again, I'm only speaking about the Shafi'iyya right now. They said it's anything above the elbow and anything above the ankle. Kalam Jameel. That's how Al-Qadi Hussein said it. Al-Shirazi in Al-Muhadhab and Al-Tanbih, he didn't really specify. Kalam Jameel. Al-Baghawi in his Tahdhib, which is basically him summarizing the efforts of Al-Qadi Hussein, he says you should not go over halfway to the shoulder and over halfway to the knee. Kalam Jameel. You shouldn't go beyond that. Some argued that no one mentioned that before, and others said, no, this could be understood from what Al-Qadi said, etc. Shafi'i also said, as I mentioned, that in the issue of when does it actually count? Now, the Shafi'iyya, they look at it and they said the ghurra and the tahjeel do not initiate, cannot be possibly counted unless you finish the limb first. However, Imam al-Ramli, he said, well, it could count. So between Ibn Hajar and Ramli, we were stuck with two different things. Okay. And we'll get to Tayammum, it gets more interesting. But as for the other schools, when it came to al-ghurra wa tahjeel, they simply said, in the wajh, it is going beyond the boundaries of the face in any direction. Tamam. They said the max when you're you're looking at is getting some into the head and some over the neck. As for The tahjeel, which has to do with the hands and the feet, it's anything beyond the end of it. So basically anything beyond the elbow, anything beyond the ankle. Kalam Jamil. And you could cover some of the arm before you get to the shoulder blade. Some specified by the half, similar to what Imam al-Baghawi said. Others specified different portions. وهكذا. Tamam? Why? It's all based upon this hadith from Abi Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, and it's narrated in Al-Bukhari and Muslim. It's muttafaq alayh. And this love, really, there's really not that much of a difference between this love and the love of Bukhari. Kalam Jameel. The love of Bukhari is Inna ummati yud'awna yawm al-qiyamati ghurran muhajjalina min athar al-wudu. That's literally the only difference between both narrations. So whether you use love the Muslim or love the Bukhari, Kalam Jameel, they'll both be the same thing. Although there is an issue that some suggested when he said yud'awna. Yud'awna could mean that they're called upon, while ya'tuna is a little bit more clear. So that could be why Ibn Hajar chose love the Muslim over love the Bukhari in Bulugh al-Maram. Kalam Jameel, it's probably why he went that route, because ya'tuna seems as if this is a permanent thing, whereas yud'awna might be not. It's up for discussion. Okay, Allahu a'lam. There's a narration from Imam Ahmad, and it seems to be the overall theme of the Malikiyah, that italat al-ghurra, not the tahjeel, but italat al-ghurra is something to be done every once in a while, not something that you should be maintaining. Why? Because back to like the Malikiyah mentioned when I spoke about wiping the neck, they said yukrah, and this is from ghulu. This is from al-ghulu fi din. Kalam Jameel. And from there, they came up with their approach of saying, you do this every once in a while. It's not something you do all the time. But here's an issue. They never mention a tahjeel, which brings up a discussion. When they say ghurra, do they mean tahjeel as well? According to Imam al-Dusuqi in his Hashiyah, the ghurra amongst the Maliki scholars simply refers to one concept, and that is going beyond the limb. So right there, we have another instance where they're not utilizing both terms and they're using one of them to mean one concept. Maybe that's where Al-Imam Al-Ghazali was going with when he expressed Al-Ghurra al-Tahjeel being one and the same thing. However, Al-Imam Dusuqi also goes on to say that the idea of Al-Ghurra actually has to do with idamat al-wudu, and that's sunnah. And that's a longer discussion that we would have to have on why did they go that route with that, and which we can. Maybe we'll do an open recording session on Telegram, inshallah ta'ala, in another day. But we're going to stop here, bi'idhnillah. In our next class, we're going to be speaking about at-tayammun, and we should be able to actually fulfill wudu because we've covered most of what is to come. So we should have that done, inshallah ta'ala, in our next class. Here we'll stop, bi'idhnillah. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to drop that, inshallah, into Telegram, and we'll answer it and discuss it there. وأقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله تعالى لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.